Yeah, oh, that's Palm Beach. Boca's where?
Emmanuel is the big shore, but that's up in Palm.
All right, we'll find you. We'll get you introduced.
How are you today, Jeffrey?
Probably have better food than Hillel.
She cooks it Hillel. You have a handout?
I do, but I'm wondering whether to give it out to you.
Okay, whatever.
Michael goes at the lot because I have better food.
Okay.
How you doing?
You got a comment on the Astros cheating?
I have to comment on the Astros cheating.
Yes, I'd like to hear a moral leader talk about the lack of morality.
Every time I do that, I get into trouble. People quit the shul. So I've decided to only talk about irrelevant things so that nobody walks out saying, "How could you?" Right?
The Dodgers were the ones who got cheated back.
The question, my dear friend, isn't whether we know the Astros cheated, we know why they did, we know how they did. The question is going to be when the season starts and an Astro batter gets up to bat in the first pitch of the new season, right? That guy is going to have a 99-mile-an-hour fastball headed to his nose. And it's going to happen in every park they play in. In every park they play in, and most especially in Washington and in L.A. and New York. I mean, with the places that really got rooked, and the pitchers are going to come after Astro batters. And after the 5th or 6th or 7th or 10th or 12th guy gets creamed, then the question is, what does the commissioner do then? I mean, how does the commissioner... that's going to be... No, I'm serious. That's going to be... there's ways of getting back at guys in baseball. What did Bellinger say?
He was a hero.
Well, I mean, but the question is going to be what happens when the first fastball goes high and inside and whacks someone in the face and hurts.
Waste a real game. Hit him in spring training.
Well, thank you, Douglas. That's
And they said Jews are not merciful.
it's. I love it.
Where is that?
Where does it say that? Yeah, Rachabana Liba, So, this is going to be the real problem. Now that you've opened the door to some real, I mean, it's really vicious what happened.
Yeah.
And then the question, I was talking on the radio yesterday, when there'll be a class action suit of people who spend a lot of money on World Series tickets, and then what happens? We'll see what happens.
I had a theory. If the owner were a mensch, he would take all of the postseason revenue from 2017, including the player shares and the owner shares, and donate it to the Dodgers and Yankees' favorite charities.
Yeah.
But the owner's no mensch.
Yeah, there are going to be many lawsuits filed. I mean, this kind of thing. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. It's a very interesting. It is an interesting morality.
You know what the most interesting thing is?
Yeah. We're going to welcome Rabbi Gelman back. Yeah, go ahead.
Are you saying something?
The people
put on mic?
Yeah, put it on the mic. We haven't started yet, so go ahead.
The interesting thing about cheating is that it's culturally relative.
Yeah.
We think these are absolute standards, but they're not.
Yeah.
There is nothing in Houston. No outrage, no craziness, no nothing, because it's Houston.
Yeah.
In L.A. and New York, it's a different story.
Yeah.
So we have to ask ourselves, and this even goes back to the Torah, when it's one of our guys who cheats,
Yeah.
do we have a different view than when it's one of their guys?
Right. And then what constitutes cheating and that kind of stuff. So
This was cheating.
This was cheating. Okay.
There ain't no question about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Banging on a garbage can when it's an off-speeds pitch.
Yeah. Well, you take a look. You take a look at what is Altuve? What's his name?
Altuve.
Altuve's at home and away statistics.
Right.
Right. You know.
Now it makes sense.
When he's away, he bats 187. When he's at home, he bats 487. Now, this is abyssal epis, a little wiggly there, you know. Yeah, well, they didn't want him to touch the jersey, you know.
Yeah.
He hits the home run. Hi, guys. Welcome. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. It's Valentine's Day. Is he being nice to you? Good morning. Good morning. Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos. Good morning. Good Shabbos. Come in. There's plenty of room. We got lots of room. Guys, move over. Make some room. Good morning. Good Shabbos. Okay. Good morning. Good morning. את כועסת עליו? יש בעיה, משהו? Well, good morning, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. It's good to see you. Thank you for coming this morning. Welcome to Valley Bet Shalom. Torah study. Welcome back to Rabbi Gelman for his sojourns. Welcome back to Rabbi Schuldenfrei, who's with us this morning with his son. Good morning. Following our Torah study this morning, we're going to actually receive the Ten Commandments this morning, so buckle your seatbelts. But following our reading, there is any number of services going on in the building. There's a nice singing service, musical service in the Sherlo Padi Chapel this morning. There'll be meditation minyan in here. And then following all of that, of course, lunch, and I don't know what it is. I think it's lasagna. And then there'll be Parsha group meeting in the youth lounge. And everyone is invited to come in to learn. This coming week on Wednesday night, the second to the last session of our College of Jewish Studies, we've been doing the debates that shape Judaism in our time. And the last time was a wonderful talk from Rabbi Chaim Seidlerfeller about Zionism, Achad Ha'am and Herzl. This coming time will be another wonderful talk from Rabbi Farkas and me. And we'll talk about the shaping of American Judaism through the voices of two great scholars who actually were very close to each other, Mordechai Kaplan and Abraham Joshua Heschel. You have to imagine that these two gentlemen with European graciousness walked up to the Jewish Theological Seminary every morning, greeted each other warmly, took the elevator up to the 6th floor, wished each other a very happy and productive day. One went into one office, one went to the office across the hall, wrote vicious things about each other, met back for lunch, had a quiet lunch together, chatted amicably, went back to their office, wrote vicious things about each other, and then went home. Kaplan, who's the great father of Reconstructionism, also the great teacher of our teacher, Rabbi Schulweiss, and Abraham Joshua Heschel, who had a very completely different image of what Judaism and modernity ought to be. So we'll take that debate up on Wednesday night, 7 o'clock, and of course there's always good cookies here. Next week, we will welcome a guest to the Torah study over Shabbat. I have an important announcement to make about this. A dear friend, Rabbanit, or Rabbi Nechama Goldman Barash, is, and I'm not making this up, is an Orthodox Israeli woman rabbi. She is trained she's one of the very few women who is authorized as a halachic scholar, a halachic advocate in the courts of Israel. She has started calling herself Rabbanit, which is as close to rabbi as she'll let herself get. She's an Orthodox teacher, teaches at the Pardes Institute, in Jerusalem and is an authority on Jewish marital law and personal law in Israel. She's an American woman who made Aliyah to Israel with her family. Very, very erudite, learned, and wonderful scholar. And she'll be our guest for Shabbat. So Shabbos morning, we'll be learning with her in here. She'll do Torah study with us. It's Parshat Mishpatim, which is all about Jewish law. And then we'll have davening. After davening, we'll have lunch. After lunch, she will do a Shabbat shiur, about 12:30 here, and talk about what it means to be an Orthodox woman rabbi in the Israeli context. Okay? Now, there is one big caveat, and it's mostly for the people at home. So welcome, good morning, we're delighted to see you. I can see you in your pajamas, they're very cute. There will be no live stream next week because Rabbi Barash doesn't use a microphone. So we can't live stream the session. So those of you watching at home, what we're going to do is we're going to post on the live stream site where you'd normally find this broadcast a couple of her talks. She has a number of recorded talks on the same topic. So you will be hearing what we're hearing, only you'll be hearing what she said a couple of months ago in another context when she was able to record it. And all of you who will be here live get to hear her. You could all get out of bed and come join us. She'll start at 12:30, and that means you could get out of bed and have breakfast and be here on time. So Torah study in the morning with Rabbi Barash, and then in the afternoon, a conversation about women's voices in halakha in Israel today. Very important topic, and the changing nature of the Orthodox community in Israel right now. Okay? That's next week. That makes sense? And then 2 more dates I'd like you to keep in your calendar. February 28th, Friday night, which is 2 weeks from yesterday, we will have a special service commemorating the American Soviet Jewry movement. So you also have the beautiful exhibition in the hallway, The Power of Protest. We are going to be talking about the great movement, the American Jewish political movement to free Jews from the Soviet Union. And we have a number of members of our own community who were deeply involved in that. Eddie Robin was the national chairman of one of the coalitions. Janice Kaminer-Resnick and Marcia Volpert were the local chair people. And we have numbers of our friends who went to Russia to bring prayer books and study materials and teach classes to Jews in Russia. They're going to come and recount their stories of being arrested by the KGB and other things. So that's on February 28th, 7:30 here in the shul. Please come and join us for that. And then last, a moment of shameless self-promotion. On March 5th, Thursday night, we're going to do a presentation of my new book, the book on Rabbi Schulweis. So normally, my dear friend Rabbi Bradley Shavit Artson, who's the dean of the rabbinical school at Ziegler, I come and interview him. This week, he's coming to interview me. So, and if you'd like to pick up a copy of the book, they're available now. They came in, and we can get it for you cheap. You know, it costs a fortune on Amazon, but we can get it for you cheap. You know, all right. And so, what?
How cheap?
Oh, depends on if you want the whole book or only chapter 3. You know, but you're welcome. You can buy them here in the shul at the desk. I will sign it for you for a small fee. No, I will sign it for you. And you can show your grandchildren. It's really funny when I find my books. You have the same experience. You find your books in a used bookstore somewhere, and you open the flyleaf, and it's, to Bob with love and affection from your friend Rabbi Feinstein. And here it is in a used bookstore. So there's a story that George Bernard Shaw once found one of his books like that. So he bought it and sent it back to the guy. Said, you might have misplaced this. Anyway, it's kind of fun. All right, this morning I'm debating whether to do this, but we might as well do this. So let me pass this out. Your dear rabbi, me, not him. Your dear rabbi, he has. I know. I have a streak of the obsessive in me. We'll hold on to this one for a minute. And there's 2 pages, okay? Yeah, pass this one out too. What the hell? Let me have one of those, Douglas, so I don't forget. So there's a line in the Torah this morning that caught me, and I couldn't let it go. So you're gonna have to go along with a little bit of obsessive here. This morning's Torah portion is the great revelation at Mount Sinai. Last week we crossed the Red Sea. Remember? So your feet are probably still pretty muddy. And from the Red Sea, we journey out to Mount Sinai, which is the holy mountain. Now, Mount Sinai is a holy mountain, not just for Jews, but for everybody in that neighborhood. That's where Moses met God with the burning bush. That's where Elijah's, there's 2 pages. That's where Elijah's going to end up, meeting God as well. And Moses brings his people to the mountain, and there an epiphany happens. And we've learned this before. In past years, we read this very carefully. The text is very difficult. The text of the Torah in chapter 19 and chapter 19 is a very difficult text. It's obviously a text that is a splicing together of numerous sources. And what I suggested last time that we read it was that the roughness of the text is intentional. It's not an accident. It's not that this was just bad editing or they didn't have a chance to proofread it. Right? What happens here is that the editor of this text is intentionally trying to give us the sense of what it's like to be standing at a momentous, powerful place and moment and experiencing things happening around you and not fully understanding what's happening around you, but feeling the power of the moment. And so the roughness of the text reflects the roughness of the experience. Or if you want to look at it a little bit differently, it's the messiness of memory. Because when we have those moments, then we try to remember them. Right? You try to remember them. So my kids come to me and they say, "What was your first date with Ima?" And I say, "Oh, we went here." And she says, "No, we went there." And I said, "Oh, and she was wearing this." She said, "I was wearing that." "Oh, and we did this." "No, we did that." You know, when these moments, we don't remember them well. And the Torah captures, whether you want to understand it as the moment we stood there, or whether it's the roughness of the memory that's there, that's the text. And then, as you turn the page from chapter 19 to chapter 20, it resolves into the Word of God. Chapter 20 is the 10 Commandments. And that text, by contrast, is crystal clear. It is crystal clear. I mean, in a sense, the idea is that the event was a mess, but the message was crystal clear. The memory we have of, you know, what we experienced is different, it's difficult, but what we learn from that moment is crystal clear, and the contrast between the two is just remarkable. The messiness of the event and the crystal clarity of the message. The event is this moment of meeting God. I mean, the Torah really says that. And as you're reading it, you go, wow, right? On the 3rd day, the new moon, after Israel had gone forth from Egypt, on that very day they entered the wilderness of Sinai. I'm on page 436 in the Chumash, if you happen to be there, chapter 19, right? And God says to Moses, "Gather the people." And then at the end of the chapter, if you come, you know, God speaks to them. Right? If you look at page 439, which is the 16th verse, which describes the event. On the 3rd day, as morning dawned, there was thunder and lightning and a dense cloud upon the mountain and a loud blast of the horn, and the people who were in the camp trembled. Now you're at a mountain, and you hear this enormous sound, and the ground is shaking. What's happening? It's an earthquake or a volcano. It's some kind of geological moment, right? Moses, listen to the words of this. Moses led the people out of the camp toward God. Whew. I mean, what does that mean? He led them toward the mountain, but the Torah doesn't say he led them to the mountain. The Torah says he led them toward God. And they took their places at the foot of the mountain. There's a lot of midrash on that line. Tachtit hahar can mean foot of the mountain. It could also mean underneath the mountain. So there's a very famous midrash that says God held the mountain up and said, "You want my Torah? I make you an offer you can't refuse." Right? Now Mount Sinai was all in smoke. That's a strange phrase. We don't use that in English. You say on fire, but not in, right? Ashan kulo. The whole thing was covered with smoke, for the Lord had come down upon it in fire. So it was a volcano, right, with all the attendant geological special effects. But they're trying to describe something which is indescribable. I mean, again, think about the critical moments of life and how indescribable they are. If you come Wednesday night, Heschel's word is ineffable, which actually means there are no words to describe it. So for something that's undescribable, Heschel writes 400 pages, right? I like people who can't describe things in 400 pages. And the smoke rose like the smoke of a kiln. So you have to know what a kiln is and what the smoke of a kiln in order to understand that metaphor. And the whole mountain trembled violently, and the blare of the horn grew loud and loud. The blare of the horn grew like, what horn? Now, anybody happen to remember the 94 earthquake? I remember it because it was under my kitchen, right? It was called the Granada Hills earthquake, but that's a lie. It was called the Northridge earthquake. I lived in Granada Hills, and the earthquake was under my kitchen. My house jumped 8 feet in the air. What was really interesting, there's a noise. Besides the house creaking, and besides the burglar alarm going off and the kids screaming, there's a noise that goes along with an earthquake. It's hard to describe because it surrounds you. And there's such a sense of helplessness because there's nothing to hold on to. There's this sense that there's no handlebars. There's nothing to hold on to as the earth is trembling and the house is shaking, and there's nothing that's not shaking at that point. So the sound of this momentous moment, and Moses spoke and God answered in thunder. I like that. Hi. How you doing? And the Lord, look at verse 20. The Lord came down upon Mount Sinai, which assumes that God is up and coming down on top of the mountain. And the Lord called Moses to the top of the mountain. And that's the experience that's described here. And you can see, it's very strange because he's at one moment he's at the top of the mountain, at one moment he's at the bottom of the mountain, and then God repeats 3 different times, don't let the people get too close to the mountain, because if they touch the mountain, they're going to die. It's a very weird chapter. And then you turn the page to chapter 20, and it becomes crystal clear. Here are the instructions. And the instructions are without, there's a lot of commentary here, but the instructions are crystal clear. I'm God. You'll have no other gods before me. You won't take my oaths in vain. You'll respect your parents. You'll keep Shabbat, and one after the other. It's a crystal clear revelation. The contrast between the two is just remarkable. It's just absolutely remarkable. Now, what I wanted to get to today is one line that I'm obsessed with. And I apologize for this, but it's what you got to deal with. And if you come with me back to chapter 19, right? Come to chapter 19. Let's begin again. Page 436, right? They get to the wilderness of Sinai, and they journeyed from Rephidim, and they encamped in the wilderness. And Moses went up to God. Really? And the Lord called him from the mountain, saying, this you'll say to the house of Jacob, and declare to the children of Israel, you've seen what I did to the Egyptians, how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to me. Now, if you'll obey me faithfully and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession amongst all the people. Indeed, all the earth is mine, but you will be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation.
You know what that means?
Hang on a minute. Let me give you the microphone so you can tell the
I
world.
don't know if you know what that means.
What does it mean?
Eagle's wings.
Yeah.
Did you ever teach eagle's wings?
No, go ahead. Teach eagle's wings.
So I teach in the name of my teacher, who is Nelson Glick.
Okay.
And Nelson took me and saved me from becoming even more of a communist. And he would take me into the desert and introduce me to the spies that he trained, the Bedouins, when he won World War II as the head of the OSS in the Middle East. And he said, look up, look up. And there were turkey vultures, or an eagle. We don't know. It could have been a golden eagle.
Yeah.
And he said, look carefully. And there was a little dot. I looked, what is it? He said, that's a chick. That's an eagle chick. And I said, really? He said, you know, eagles nest on escarpments, on the edge of cliffs, to protect the eggs from predators. But it means that when their chicks are ready to fledge, to fly on their own, they can't do it, because if they go out of the nest, they'll fall 1,000 feet and kill themselves. So the way eagles teach their chicks to fly is they throw them out of the nest, and they're flapping around, and they're basically failing. And the father or mother eagle swoops down underneath, and on their large pinion feathers, they catch the chick, and like a tennis ball, they flick it back up into the air.
Wow.
And it's flicking, and then it's falling, and they swoop down, and they catch it, and they flick it up.
Wow.
And Nelson looked at me, and he said, "You don't have any children yet. When you have children, you will understand the metaphor of eagle's wings."
Oh, that's very nice.
He said, that is exactly how every parent teaches their children. You catch them sometimes you miss, but you try to catch them and you flick them back up, and then they try to fly on their own. Mm-hmm. And that is exactly how God teaches us in the Torah.
Nice.
On eagle's wings.
Very nice.
God is there to catch us.
Yeah.
Sometimes God misses.
Yeah.
But we are
flipped.
on eagle's wings.
Very nice. Beautiful. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you. Wait, hang on. Take the mic so the world can hear you. Thank you.
And that's the term that's been given to the airlift of Yemenite Jews into Israel right after the War of Independence.
Right. So there was this wonderful story. It's a beautiful story, which most of you will know, I'm sure, that after the War of Independence, the Israeli Air Force arranges to go to Yemen and pick up the Yemenite Jews, and they'd never seen airplanes before because they're a very primitive population. And they knew this verse, and that's the verse. The idea is that it was eagle's wings that they saw coming to rescue them, coming to save them. So here you have two images. So the first image is, I carry you on eagle's wings. That was very beautiful. Thank you. And then the second image is, here's the covenant. Ready? This is not an absolute covenant. This is a contingent covenant, a conditional covenant. If, then. If, then. That's the nature of this relationship. If you will obey and keep my covenant, then you will be my treasured possessions among all the people of the earth. And even though I own the whole earth and everything is precious to me, you will be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. What's that mean? Mamlechet Kohanim v'Goy Kadosh. So the way you have to do this is think of an analogy. What is a priest to a people? So you have a populace, and 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 of the populace are designated as priests. Okay? Priests in any sense of the word. What's their role? What's their restriction? What does it mean to be a priest in a population? What does a priest do for a population?
Guides them.
Sorry?
Guides.
Guides them. Moral leader.
Sometimes.
Okay? That's the ideally, okay? Ideally. A moral leader. What else does a priest do? Come on.
Intermediary between people and God.
It's an intermediary between people and God. Very good. And an intermediary between the ordinary experiences and sacred experiences. Right? Between ordinary experiences and sacred experiences. Okay? And rabbis have a little touch of this. We're not priests. But sometimes we play that role. So if there is a baby naming or lahavdil, a shiva minyan, when the rabbi walks in the room, people change. Like now something's about to happen. Because we are the bridge between the ordinary experience and something powerful and sacred about to happen. Yeah.
But in chapter 19, verse 22, we already had priests.
Yeah, but now we're talking about something different. Israel's role vis-a-vis the rest of the world is going to be the equivalent of a priest's role vis-a-vis the rest of his or her population. So we talk about it, moral leadership, a conduit of the sacred, an intermediary to God, a keeper of tradition, keeper of memory, a teacher of morality. They're describing, trying to play out what Jewish particularism means. It's not that you were born smarter than everybody else. It's not that you're better looking. Well, I think we're better looking than everybody else. It's not that you have any particular genetic talents. I wish, but instead what you have is you will play a special role vis-a-vis the world, says God. That's my plan. The whole world I created, but you have... Now remember, Abraham is chosen, right, to be a blessing to all mankind, to be a vessel of blessing. Now it's being spread to the whole people. Mamlechet Kohanim, a kingdom entirely of priests for the rest of the world, right? V'goy kadosh. Goy kadosh means either a nation separated, a nation sanctified, a nation who is bringer of sanctity. That becomes the definition of Jewish particularism. Yeah.
Does the rest of the world hate its priests?
Well, that's an interesting question. So, the interesting question, there is a theory. It wasn't Nietzsche. Does the world hate its priests? So one of the theories, I'm not endorsing the theory, but I'll describe it. One of the theories for the origins of anti-Semitism is that nobody likes the tattletale. Nobody likes the kid who says, let's do what's right, when everyone's having too much fun doing what's wrong. And if you have a people whose job it is to represent divine morality, and you resent that, so you end up hating those people. That's a theory, one of the theories of the origins of anti-Semitism. Rabbi Schuldenfeld.
Yeah, the juxtaposition of these two phrases is interesting because when it says Mamlechet Kohanim, it sort of implies, right, that relationship with other, as opposed to Goy Kadosh, which assumes sort of a distinctness from other.
That's very good.
Like you're kind of on that line between being in relationship and being apart.
Well, that's
to create that balance.
Very, very good. The relation, the idea of you're one of, and on the other hand, you're separated from. You're apart from. Right? And you think about for a moment social roles that put us in society, but put us as a separate sort of unit of society, right? A separate. So, I was at Kaiser the other day, and you walk in, and you know who the doctor is because they wear the white coat with the little name thing on it, right? So the doctor says, the doctor encourages me to call him by his first name because they want to be cordial, but at the same time, you're doctor. You may be much younger than me, but you're a doctor. So apart from, but also part of, at the same time, right? These kinds of things. So police officers, if you know anybody who's a police officer, sometimes they have a hard time. Like they'll go to a party on a Saturday night and they won't tell them what they do. My friend says, when people ask you what you do, what do you say? You say, tell them. Yeah, you ever been on a cruise ship and tell them you're a rabbi? Oh, yeah. I'm sitting across from a guy once, and we start to talk, and it turns out we know a lot of the same people. He says, okay, what do? You tell me what you do, and I'll tell you what I do. I said, I'm a conservative rabbi in California. He said, I'm a Harvard-trained pediatrician. He said, but don't tell anybody on this ship who I am. Because the moment someone knows that you're a pediatrician, every sick kid on the boat's going to be in front of your door. Apart from and yet part of. And the role that they're describing is this role of holiness. Right? These are the words you'll speak to Israel. Okay? Now, turn the page. Here's the part that obsessed me. And again, I apologize for this. Moses came and summoned the elders of the people and put before them all the Lord had said. All the people answered at once and said, everything God spoke we do. We get it. We'll do it. Jews are good like that. They agree right away. I don't know if you've ever done business with Jewish people, but they're very agreeable. Right? And Moses brought back the words to God, and God says, I'm coming. Right? And Moses, look at the next verse. Moses reported, verse 10, God says, the Lord said to Moses, go to the people and warn them to stay pure today and tomorrow and wash your clothes. I think it's wonderful, by the way. God doesn't want you showing up to Revelation in a dirty shirt. Go wash your clothes. Stay pure. Now, what does that mean, stay pure? Right? V'yomer Adonai Moshe el ha'am kidashtem. Stay kadosh. Right? Stay kadosh, he says. Stay holy. It's actually holy, not pure. Let them be ready for the third day. On the third day, the Lord will come down. Okay? Don't touch the mountain. Now go down to verse 14. What did God say to them? Stay pure, clean. It's the Hebrew is v'kidashtem, be holy, be sacred. What does Moses say? Moses came down the mountain to people, verse 14, and warned the people to stay pure. Right? Vayikadesh et ha'am. Be kadosh. Be ready for holy moments. Wash your clothes. And he said to them, be ready on the third day. Al tigshu el isha. Don't go near a woman.
That's what you're obsessed about?
Yes.
We'll deal with this next week in our session.
We will. Al tigshu el isha. What does that have to do with being holy, with being pure? What? And notice, who said that, by the way?
Moses.
Yeah, not God. What did God say?
Be pure.
Be pure. What did Moses add? Moses interpreted God's message, be pure, meaning...
No stupid.
Well, that's the question. What does he mean by that? But then there's a huge implication to this. Ami. Wait, hang on. Take the mic. You get the mic so the whole world can hear you. So your dad in Philly can felt.
I think there's a similarity with the whole idea of Hajj and a pilgrimage.
Yeah? How's that?
And the details that you're at your purest sense. There's no sense. You have no money, no jewelry, no nothing. And part of it also is that you are as clean and pure as possible.
Okay.
And that it's your journey, not anybody else's journey.
Yeah. You're going on this journey, and you have to go the way God made you. You're not identified by your social position or your wealth. You're going as a creature of God, in the image of God, and that's enough. And that you go in a state of, you represent that with a state of purity. You wear something that's white. When you think about Yom Kippur, we wear something that's white, and we go in a state of purity. But there's an implication here which is astonishing. And it's astonishing and it's disturbing, and that's the reason why I stopped at this point instead of going on to the Ten Commandments, which is what every other rabbi in America is talking about this morning. And the astonishing part is, yes.
I think it harkens back to...
Wait, hang on, you're going to get the mic, you're going to be famous all over the world.
I think it harkens back to the Adam and Eve story, and because... Right, and Eve led Adam to sin, so you have to stay, if you're going to be pure, you have to stay away from women, so you don't repeat the same thing twice.
Okay, so it's not necessarily
However,
sexual
that's
things.
not my recommendation.
No, I appreciate that. So it's hearkening back to creation. This is the creation story of a holy people. Earlier we had the creation story of people, of humanity. The creation story of people includes a violation of God's law that was initiated by women, and therefore women are somehow on the opposite side of God. They're danger to the process of creating holiness, to purity. Well, you see, the word, it's interesting. The translation, it says purity, but the Hebrew doesn't say purity. The Hebrew says vayikadesh. It says holiness. Sanctification. Now, you could interpret that as purity. And then he says, wash your clothes. So that's cleanliness, physical cleanliness. But Kadesh means something different. It means sanctity in some way. And what's ironic, of course, is that the word for marriage in Jewish life is kiddushin. When some of you got married, you said hareat mikudeshet li. So it's interesting that on the one hand, kiddushin, which means to be attached one to the other, and here it says don't go near a woman. He adds that. Now, here, the part that astonishes me, and we can play with this a bit, is that if he's telling you don't go near a woman, who's he talking to? The men. He takes for granted that he's talking to the men. Right? You see how that works? If you say, Al tikshu el isha, that means, he's just talking to the men. This is the birth moment of the people. This is the most intense connection with God ever. It is so intense, by the way, that we pray for a repeat every day and every Shabbos. In the Kedusha of Musaf, if you stick around this morning at about 11:45, you will hear the cantor sing, V'hu yashmienu Birachamav shenit le'enei kol chai. You should only speak to us second time in the front of the whole world. I mean, this event is so important that we keep asking God to do it again, man. Play it again. Play those 10 commandments again. But this is so critical. This powerful moment of connection between the people and the God that just rescued them and now sanctifies them, and he's only talking to the men? Huh? Do you see? That's what obsessed me. You see the problem here? You want to add something? Go ahead, please.
I think it is about sex and about being pure or kadosh.
Yeah.
Because, first of all, we have to remember that the Israelites were in the desert. It was very hard to wash their bodies. So,
I mean, wash your clothes is okay.
Yeah, but it's harder to wash your bodies, with cold water, or if they had any water or whatever.
Nothing's cold in the desert. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So it was a big thing to be pure.
Yeah.
To be clean with their bodies. And when there is an act of sex, people get, they sweat, there's all kind of body fluids coming out, and then they have to take a shower again, and that's a big thing again in the desert.
Okay.
So they refrain from...
No, I hear what you're saying. I think, look, I'm not going to argue that. I mean, so you've never seen me cook. I'm messier cooking than never mind. So I'm sorry. Let's stop there. Yeah, I'm sorry.
If they refrain from sex, there won't be any Jews that are still dirty. They didn't want to take a bath.
No, I understand. I think that your interpretation of this is exactly correct. But what disturbs me, what obsessed me, I mean, Douglas, there's lots of comments. So is this notion that he's only talking to the men of the community? What do you mean only talking to the men? Now, here's my take on this, and let me show you just a parallel. And I said with deep apologies to Rabbi Silverman because his father wrote this, right? It's not misogynistic, I don't think. It's misogynistic in effect. It's not misogynistic in intent. It just reflects a social reality where gender roles were very articulated and very enforced. Look at the second source on the page I gave you. The one that says, be ready for the third date, don't go near a woman. You see that source? Look at the second one. This comes from the prayer book I grew up with. It's the Conservative Movement Sabbath and Festival prayer book. And it was edited by your saintly father, your Alev Shalom. Right? And this was the prayer you say after the Torah reading. There was a little prayer for the congregation. It's Yakum Purkan. And then you'd read this out loud. The rabbi read this out loud every Shabbos of my life growing up. And it only took me 30 years to hear what he said, right? May he who blessed our fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, bless the people of this congregation and of all congregations, them, their wives, their sons and daughters, and all their dear ones. What's wrong with that sentence? Yeah, them, their So the people of this congregation are the, and then who else? Then who else, right? So what you're doing here, and this is what the Torah is reflecting, is a sense of gender which assigns men, the masculine, the role of normal, and assigns to the feminine, the women, the role of other. Either adjunct, them, their wives, their sons and daughters, or, if you really read the thing, don't go near a woman, a sort of danger, a sort of pollutant. And you'll find that in the tradition also. If you look at the source just above that, I'll be right with you back here, in Talmud Brachot, there's a whole discussion in Leviticus about not seeing the nakedness of. So the Talmud wants to know, what does that mean, not see the nakedness of? Right? Rabbi Yitzchak taught an exposed handbreadth of a woman's body constitutes nakedness. So if a woman exposes a handbreadth of her flesh, she's considered an illicit woman. a temptation to men, a pollutant to the sanctity of the community, right? Then the Talmud comes back and says, not a handbreadth. Anyone who gazes upon a woman's little finger is considered as if he gazed upon her nakedness. And his intentions are impure. It makes no difference where he looks or how much is exposed, even less than a handbreadth. This applies even to his wife with regard to the recitation of the Shema. Meaning, if a guy is saying Shema in the evening before he goes to bed, and his wife is putting on her pajamas, and she exposes a handbreadth of flesh, it ruins the atmosphere of prayer in the room. There's an atmosphere here in which women are a danger to men because women's natural eroticism will destroy any kind of sanctity, any kind of purity that a man can have in his thoughts. Rev Chisda taught a woman's exposed leg is considered nakedness, and then Shmuel, which is another great rabbi, a woman's singing voice. This is the origin of that law of Kol Isha. Now, if you think this is extreme, let me tell you that in Israel, every year at Yom HaAtzmaut, there is a tremendous ceremony in Jerusalem celebrating Israel's independence. There's a ceremony in Jerusalem, and there's a ceremony on Har Herzl. And there's a huge argument about whether women are allowed to sing at that ceremony. Because the Orthodox rabbinate considers a woman's voice to be a pollutant, a danger, somehow a distraction from things sanctified. And that's where this sort comes from. Rav Sheshet said a woman's hair is considered nakedness, which is why Orthodox women cover their hair or shave it off and wear a tichel. I mean, ironically, what they do is, if you've ever been in Orthodox neighborhoods, they shave off their regular hair and they wear wigs, which are a lot sexier than what they had underneath. I mean, it's an interesting thing. But you see what's going on here. So one level assigns set gender roles, male and female, which today we've even gone past that when we talk about indeterminate gender, but it assigns gender roles of male and female and assigns males the role of normal and females the role of other. Then there's another layer of it which assigns male the role of normal and women as a danger to that. Don't go near a woman, because if you go near a woman, you won't be able to confront God. Because somehow women and God are opposite each other. And that comes from the Adam and Eve story. Women are the distraction. Women are the pollutant to the sanctity of the spiritual environment. And that comes down through Jewish history. That gets passed down through Jewish history until the 1970s, when women begin to revolt against that. And I'll take that. We'll start that in just a moment, but first we have a few comments. So, Bob.
You got pretty close to answering my question.
Well, thank God.
Pretty close.
That's waiting. The story of my life.
However.
You see, you may be leaving, so we're training somebody else. You see, you're going to have to move up here, right, and wear purple sweaters.
That would be an honor.
Ah, there you go. You'll be ordained in the Gilman School of Rabbinic Disputation. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, where is my place at Sinai, and why should I still be willing to sit in this room this morning? No. You're talking.
I agree with you.
One of the central issues that I have.
Yeah.
You've explained it. It's been very painful to hear it, even though I've heard it before. So now you tell me, please.
Yeah.
Why I should still be here, and what is my place at Sinai?
Because there is a self-correcting mechanism within Jewish tradition. Because we worship God, not the Torah of any particular generation. And because we worship a God who's beyond the Torah of any particular generation, we are always going back and re-critiquing the Torah that we've received. We re-critique it again and again and again. Right? I'll give you two simple. We did this last week, so for those of you who are simple example. The Torah says that we crossed the Red Sea, and when we got to the other side, Moses held his arm, and the sea came and it drowned all the Egyptians, and we broke spontaneously into beautiful singing and dancing because we were free. The Torah has no compunctions about burying thousands of Egyptians because of their oppression. That's a tribal response to your own oppression. There's a midrash. 1,000 years after the Torah, the rabbis write a midrash that when the people of Israel were dancing on the side of the sea, the angels in heaven began to sing and dance as well, because evil had been drowned in the sea. And God comes to the angels and says, "Shtok, be quiet. My children are drowning in the sea. You don't celebrate. You don't sing." Now that midrash is astonishing, because what the midrash does is literally create a second story to the story, a second layer to the story. That earthly ethics would allow you to celebrate the death of your enemy, but heavenly ethics demand that you see the humanity even in your enemies, and that while you're glad that evil has been vanquished and you're now free, you don't celebrate. You don't celebrate. I fast the day before Pesach in solidarity with all the Egyptian boys who died so that I could be free, because I'm a firstborn. At the Pesach Seder, I dip out wine from my cup, because as much as I'm glad as those bastards got everything that was coming to them, that's my tribal side, my universalist side said, I don't celebrate the suffering of my enemies. I don't celebrate that. So there is a self-correcting mechanism in this tradition, and it comes from the idea that God is beyond any particular formulation of God. We don't kill you over creed, because creed is always momentary and it's culturally based. And there's always a way of going back and looking at it again and saying, now wait a minute. So what I'm about to show you is that in 1973, the Jewish community, that self-correcting mechanism of the Jewish faith kicked in and began saying, hang on a minute, that can't be right. That can't be right. That is a process that began in the mid-1970s and isn't finished yet. We're actually in the middle of that process. We're still not really sure. Okay? And we'll show you that in just a second. Right? I make it here in the day school at VBS. We have minyan a couple of mornings a week. I make all the girls wear kippot just like all the boys. I've gotten endless objection to that policy. Yes, from people who think they're more traditional. Why would girls have to wear kippot? I said, why not? Why not? Why wouldn't they wear kippot? The reason why the Jewish tradition allowed women to have their hair free and uncovered while men had to cover their hair was that they could attract husbands. The girls in 4th grade are not attracting husbands. But I think that they should feel the same sense of sanctity when they enter a Beit Knesset, a synagogue, that the boys do. So we're still in the middle of this debate. How about tefillin, people say? Tefillin's a really interesting question. Are tefillin a masculine? By putting leather straps around my arm and my head, is that a masculine expression of spirituality? Should there be an equivalent female, feminine expression? We're in the middle of a process. But that's the self-correcting process of the tradition. That's why I'm asking you to stick around for a while. And stick around for 300 years. We'll figure this out. It takes 300 years to figure out anything in Jewish life. So just come back in 289 years. Hi.
Hi. Actually, I don't know if Torah is wrong, because you said initially you were confused, right?
Obsessed.
You said you were obsessed with this
I'm
sentence.
obsessed, not confused.
And you said initially
I know that I'm obsessed.
There's clouds, and then the second part is very clear, you said.
Yes, the second part is the law itself, yeah.
And initially, God says, right?
Yeah.
Be pure.
Yeah, and Moshe adds the... Right.
Moshe adds.
Right.
So he makes that mistake. And
yes.
Moshe made mistakes. Moshe got angry, killed.
Good.
Moshe made mistakes. And so maybe God said, from now I'm going to make it very clear. And I'm going to say it twice. And maybe all the other rabbis
No,
you got mistake.
I think...
And we're correcting.
You know what it is? You're so nice. You're so much nicer than me. You've explained it nicely. Look, what's going on here is... It's not it's misogynistic in its effect, but it's an intent. It's just reflecting a reality. We reflect realities, and we take them for granted. Culture is that which you can't see. So if you live in a culture with very defined gender roles, where men are in the public sphere and women are reduced to the confined to the private sphere, if you live in that kind of a reality, then this makes a lot of sense. It's Moshe's extension of God's law makes a lot of sense. You see? It's only when someone comes along and tells you look at that you open your eyes and see the cultural affectations that you couldn't see before. Right? Rosa Parks decides that she's going to stay in her seat when a white man tells her to get up and he wants to sit in the bus seat. Right? It was normal in the American South for black women to get up and give their seats away to white men. I mean, that was normal. It was normal to have separate drinking fountains and bathrooms for black people and white people. These things were normal. When I was in 7th grade at Charles Evans Hughes Junior High School, boys took shop, wood shop, electric shop, agriculture, industrial drafting. Girls took home ec, cooking and cleaning. How many times do you think I've used a lathe since 7th grade? How many meals have I cooked and how many buttons have I sewed? But that was normal, you see? But then one day someone opens your eyes and says, hey, look, either that's not fair, that's wrong, that's stupid, that's foolish, that doesn't reflect reality anymore, or reality needs to reflect a different reality, and we open our eyes and we say, you're right. It takes a long time for social attitudes to change. It takes a long time. So what I want to show you in a moment, as soon as we get everyone's comments, is I want to show you where the attitude began to change. Okay, yes, please.
I agree with everybody that this is rather sexist, but however,
be careful what you say next, okay? Because you may not make it out of the shul alive,
But anyway, there's a principle in the Talmud, I believe it's called that women are exempt from mitzvot shezman gromeh. And so you could say that this applies in this particular case. It's not that women were excluded, but it's just that because they had other duties like taking care of children, that they had the option of being at Mount Sinai and not participating.
Yeah, there's a beautiful poem written by a Jewish feminist in the 70s that said, we all were at Sinai, and we all heard God's word, but I was back taking care of the babies while you got to stand in the front. The theory is this. The Talmud tries to figure out why certain mitzvot women do and certain mitzvot women don't. And it comes up with the summary statement of mitzvot aseh shazon grama, by any positive mitzvah that is time-bound. You have to put on tefillin at a certain time of the day. Women are exempt from, because they were involved in family life, they couldn't be depended upon to do those things. That's not a rule, it's a summary. Because there are mitzvot. Lighting Shabbos candles. You got 18 minutes to light a Shabbos candle. It's a mitzvah aseh shazam zman gramava. So there are mitzvot. It's just a summary, number one. Number two, I think that this moment is so profound in the imagination of the Jewish people that we stood together and made a covenant with God and accepted our role in the world, that to say it only applied to the men because women were off taking care of kids, that's hard for me to hold on to. Because the implications of that are brutal. And that's what you're going to see in the text in just a minute, as soon as we can get to it.
What about the school of thought that women are on a higher spiritual level than men, and really
hang on to that. We're going to get to that in just a second. Okay. We're going to get to that in just a second. Yeah. There's an answer to that, and I try to keep all the pejoratives out of the answer. So go ahead, please.
Just real quick.
No, real quick.
God's instructions seem pretty clear, and then by the time Moses interprets it with the whole woman thing, maybe Moses just has an issue with his mom.
Yeah. Or his wife. Or better yet, every woman in the room knows men just don't listen. You think you're the only one we don't listen to? God says very clearly, this is what I want you to do. And he says, what do you want me? I know you wanted to. Hang on, let's take a look at a text. We'll come right back. Okay? Look. So in 1973, which is the middle 1970s, some of you were around 1970s. You remember there was the rise of women's liberation, women's lib. Many of the leaders of women's lib in America were Jewish women, right? The founders of Ms. Magazine was Gloria Steinem and Pogrebin, right? And they happened to be Jewish women also. Bella Abzug, Betty Friedan. These are all Jewish women That is, the feminist leaders, not just Jewish feminists, not just in Judaism, but feminist leaders in America, many of them predominantly happen to be Jewish women. When they turn that feminist analysis back to their own Jewish tradition, you have some remarkable writing, some remarkable images. So there's two really powerful, well, many, but two really powerful personalities in this in the 70s. One is a professor named Rachel Adler, who happens to live here in LA and teaches at HUC. Rachel at the time was an Orthodox woman married to an Orthodox rabbi. They later divorced. She went off to get a PhD in Judaism and is now a professor at HUC, and her son I ordained as a rabbi and lives in Chicago, right? And the other is Judith Plaskow, who was a professor of religion in Manhattan, at Manhattan College. And two wonderful images. So and then I'll do a third one. So here, this is Rachel Adler in 1973 publishes a paper called "The Jew Who Wasn't There," and she's talking about women who are invisible in the Jewish world. And I'll just give you just a bit of it. It is not unusual for committed Jewish women to be uneasy about their position as Jews. Now she's an Orthodox Rebbitzin. Keep that in mind. That's who's writing this. There's an Orthodox, the wife of an Orthodox rabbi, raised Orthodox, right? It was to cry down our doubts that rabbis developed pre-packaged orations on the nobility of motherhood, the glory of childbirth and modesty, the crown of Jewish womanhood. That's your thing about the exalted Jewish woman, right? I have heard them all. I could not accept those answers for two reasons. Well, first of all, those answers did not accept me as a person. They only set rigid stereotypes which defined me by limiting directions I might grow. Second, the answers were not really honest ones. Traditional scholars agree that all philosophies of Judaism begin with an examination of Jewish law, and scholars do not discuss female status in halakha, at least not with females. Ultimately, our problem stems from the fact that we're viewed in Jewish law and practice as peripheral Jews. Men are normative, women are outside that. The peripheral Jew is excused and sometimes barred from acts and symbols which are the lifeblood of the believing community. To be a peripheral Jew is to be educated and socialized toward a peripheral commitment. Her major mitzvot aid and reinforce the lifestyle of the community and family, but they do not cultivate the relationship between the individual and God. The mitzvot of the tzadeket, that righteous woman that's held up in front of Orthodox girls, are mainly directed to serving others. She is tzadeket to the extent that she sacrifices herself in order that she may actualize others' spirituality. So in other words, she's somebody's mom, somebody's husband, somebody's wife, somebody's partner, somebody's sister, but she's never there for herself. She never claims any voice for herself. One has no sense of an attempt to cultivate a religious self built out of the raw materials of a unique personality. And then she gives this brutal ending. For too many centuries, the Jewish woman has been a golem. You know the story of the golem? Yeah. The famous golem of the monster of Prague, created by Jewish society. She cooked and bore and did her master's will, and when her tasks were done, the divine name was removed from her mouth. It is time for the golem to demand a soul. Wow. Big time acquisition. You know. Now, the other voice is Judith Plaskow's voice, and she points out that there's a network of attitudes. And you can't address any one of them without addressing the whole. And here she's going to say the only way to really understand this is to look at the whole, and that's going to require a tremendous revolution within Jewish life, which I said a moment ago, we're still in the middle of. We haven't finished it yet. So here's what she says. What emerges then is a tragic fit. Think of it a whole, right? A coherence between the role of women in Jewish life and law and teaching and symbols. Women's experience have not been recorded or shaped the contours of Jewish teaching because women do not define the normative community. But of course, women remain other when we are always seen through the filter of male interpretation without ever speaking for ourselves. And the maleness of God calls for the silence of women as shapers of the holy, but our silence in turn enforces our otherness and a communal sense of the rightness of the male image of God. So here's how it works, right? The tradition is made up by whom? The words of the tradition are whose words? Men's words. So if men's words you don't have women's perspectives. You don't have women's perspectives, women are always going to be considered other. Because they're considered other, you're never going to get their opinion, say, in law, for example. And more than that, because it's men's words, they're always going to imagine God as what? Male. But if God is male, women are always going to be other. You see the problem? You can't fix any of it without fixing all of it. Fixing all of it? You have to rewrite the whole tradition? Yes. That's the process. It's not enough just to say, okay, we'll let girls wear kippot and shul. Right? This is 1970, this is now 1990, but 1973 is when girls used to have bat mitzvahs on Friday nights. Remember that?
Sure.
So starting in the 70s, they moved them to Shabbos morning and let them read Torah. Starting in the 70s, we started counting women in minyan. We started changing the halacha. But the feminists say it's not enough just to change the halacha. It's not enough just to say change religious practices and make them more egalitarian. If you don't adjust the way that you talk about God, if you don't include women's voices in the study of Torah, if you don't, you will never move women from periphery to center. You'll never move women to from the periphery to the center. Now, that does two things. That excludes women, and so you have Bobby's very fine question, which is, if you're going to put me on the periphery, I'm going to go someplace else. I mean, and that's a very natural and legitimate response. Cynthia Ozick, famous novelist, also Orthodox practicing Jew, writes a very powerful article in response to the 1973 article, where she says, you know, we remember the Holocaust and the horror of the Holocaust and how much we lost. We lost a third of the Jewish people. We lost so many rabbis, so many teachers, so many writers, so many poets, so many minds, so many hearts. How many do we lose by telling women that they have no voice? How many poets, how many writers, how many philosophers, how many rabbis, how many teachers do we lose when we tell women they have no voice in the community? They have no voice in the community. Next week, Rabbi Nechama Barash will be here. We'll ask her how the Orthodox establishment in Israel sees her. But part of the reason she's doing what she's doing is, first of all, she's a brilliant woman with a brilliant knowledge of Torah. And why shouldn't her brilliant knowledge of Torah be expressed within the community of Torah? But once you admit women, you change, you sort of begin to change everything. You begin to change everything. And this is what these people are talking about. So one more statement here, and then we'll get some more comments, and then I want to do a little prayer with you, okay? So look at the back page. Look at the back page, right? Count down 1, 2, 3 paragraphs. The otherness of women is given dramatic expression in our language about God. Here we confront a great scandal. The God who supposedly transcends sexuality, God is not male or female, who is presumably one and whole, is known to us through language that is highly selective and partial. The images we use to describe God, the qualities we attribute to God, draw on male pronouns, male experience, and convey a sense of power and authority that is clearly male in character. Now here, the feminist revolt against this maleness takes on an even more powerful voice, because what she's saying is not just, all right, let's use he, she, let's stop using he for God, right? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down. All right, so we'll say, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures. All right, change the pronouns. That's fair. Change the images. Our Father who art in heaven. Avinu Shabbat So we'll say our heavenly parent. Instead of king, Melech HaOlam, we'll say ruler of the universe. Fair enough. This is not enough. So, and here they get to a really interesting question. Maleness, she says, is expressed in hierarchy. Men, she says, and boys, tend to rank things above and below, up and down. Ups and downs, hierarchies. Feminist thinking tends to see things as horizontal, as collaborative. right? If you think about, right? Men are always reaching to be president, captain, number one. We're number one, right? You ever been to a football team that said we're proud to be number 4 in the country, you know? Okay? But feminine, what she's arguing, and this is a very controversial thing, I mean, because is it feminist biologically? Is it feminist psychologically? Is it feminist culturally? She'd say feminism talks about non-hierarchical models of social organization, horizontal authority, the sharing of power. And if you took that and you apply that to theology, to God, then what do you get? You get a God who lives in and among us, not above us. You get a God who is expressed in loving support, not overarching authority. I mean, think of the story we just read, right? Where is God in the story? In the sky and then on the mountain. And where are we? Down below the mountain. What is God doing? Shouting instructions downward. What are we doing? Looking upward. You see the up and down here? What if you did it sideways? What if God was here among us, and it's within our common life together that we evolve the norms and rules of how to live as a community? You end up with a whole different notion of divinity and an organization of the universe. And that's what she's asking for. Now, that's like really kind of cool and amazingly radical and powerful and disturbing and off-putting, and you see that how that works? Okay, let's go one more line, and then I'll get lots of comments because I know that I'm wrong. Ready? The maleness of God is not arbitrary, nor is it simply a matter of pronouns. It leads us to the central question, the question of the otherness of women. The otherness of women leads to the maleness of God. If God is male, we are in God's image. How can maleness not be the norm of humanity? If maleness is normative, how can women not be other? Okay? And now the question then is, how do you then change the whole language of a tradition? And if you change the whole language of a tradition, does it have any relation to what it was before? Is that an authentic thing to do? And how do you live with that? How do you live? What kind of process do you go through? What kind of process do you go through? So let's take a few comments, and then before we finish today, I want to show you one poet's attempt to try to rewrite some of our prayers in the image of this other idea of God. Okay? Yes, please. Here's the mic. Yeah, please.
I think the sentence of "do not go to a woman,"
Yeah.
Al-tigash li'isha,
Yeah.
is not to degrade a woman. It's all about the act of sex. You do not get dirty. That's what it is.
Okay, and I appreciate it. You
Okay.
told me that before.
All right, right. So
right.
I'm saying
And I told you I take showers. I
other
promise
thing-
you.
yeah.
I'm a clean
But
person.
the focus, we have to know the focus.
But
It's
you
not
see
about
that
the
when you
woman.
say Al tigash le'isha, you're only talking to the men.
Yeah,
That's
that
the
is true.
problem.
Right.
Right?
Now, when Miriam
Yeah.
started singing and dancing,
Yeah.
nobody told her to shut up.
That's true.
It was okay. And the whole
Except that Moses stole the poem and made it his own. But never mind. Go ahead.
And the whole attitude
Yeah.
of the Torah towards women is actually in a very positive way. It's the rabbi that came after the destruction of the temple that explained the Torah and tried to keep all the
Okay,
Jews
all right.
together, that made all these laws. They were all men rabbis that made these laws.
You're doing a much better job defending the Torah than I am. So I'm embarrassed, you know? Yes, Douglas.
For me, reading theology is like watching paint dry.
Yeah.
I want I want novelists.
Come to my house. We're painting the house. You can watch it dry.
But I want to understand novelists who write about Jewish experiences.
Yeah.
Who are the women equivalent of Philip Roth or?
Oh, there are actually. Now there are.
Jonathan Safran.
Well, there are. There are lots, huge, lots of them. Give it to Ami behind you.
I've read her.
Give it to.
Talk about looking at God in a horizontal fashion.
Yeah.
It sounded like you were getting close to the whole idea of the predicate theology of Schulweis.
No, actually, you know what? It's not so much predicate theology of Schulweis. It's although you could, if you could go there. But what you're really looking at is they're developing this notion of Shekhinah. Now, in the mystical tradition, there's something called Shekhinah. Shekhinah literally means the presence of God. It was the mystical tradition's way of talking about God and getting very anthropomorphic, but protecting God from the anthropomorphism. So they use the word Shekhinah. Now, the Hebrew noun Shekhinah happens to be in the feminine tense. So you end up with a feminine of God. And Shekhinah, as opposed to God, who's out there, far away, inaccessible, Shekhinah is close by. According to the Midrash, the Shekhinah goes into exile with us. And when we are hurt, the Shekhinah cries. And she becomes the mother. She becomes the mother. I'll give you one piece of it, which is kind of radical, which is that under certain circumstances, she begins to resemble who the Virgin Mary is in Catholic tradition. The mother god, the mother goddess, and the feminine qualities of emotional resonance, of tears, of comfort, of closeness, of support, without commanding, is what you end up with in Shekhinah. And that's what that's where some of these people have gone. I'll show you where others have gone in just a second. Yeah, please.
Okay. So another way to look at this, I think, is to show the weakness of the male.
The what?
The weakness of the male.
Yeah.
And the fact that the male is not capable of handling things once he is with a woman. In fact, I've heard this from Orthodox men and women who talk about having the separation in the synagogue. It's because men would be distracted and not be able to pray.
Yes, that's really great. So here's what I'd like you to consider. Tell your Orthodox friends the following, okay? Every 3 years, we switch sides. Every 3 years, the men sit behind the mechitza and the women sit in the front. Every 6 months, every week. Let's just alternate. If it's in fact just to protect the men from the horrible, erotic, uncontrollable eroticism that they feel when women come to shul, really the women should be up in front and the men should be in the closet in the back. And I would be really happy. And there's some Orthodox synagogues, thank God, that are built that way. But there's too many of them that are not.
But this is an answer that many Orthodox
do. And I have a hard time with it,
and the other thing,
to say the least.
I've spoken to Orthodox women to ask them if they feel
I'm sure
that they
don't.
are other or and they don't. And
No.
one response I got from a very educated Orthodox woman was, she said there are different functions that our hand has than our feet have.
Right.
One is not better than the other. They're applying the functions that they were meant to apply.
Right. And you can live without a hand and you can live without a foot. Try living without a heart or a brain. I mean, I respect that. I respect that. And if a woman feels, if a woman is in a prayer space where she feels that is where she belongs and she feels comfortable there and she has good kavanah there and she can feel close to God, I bless that. I'm glad that we have a variety of different expressions of Judaism in our community, and I bless the sanctity of those spaces.
Have to be aware of that.
If you tell me that, I'm going to tell you that I have a whole lot of trouble with that. I have a whole lot of trouble with that because it sounds to me like, it sounds to me like a rationalization of inequality and a way of trying to keep people in their place. And with due respect, I'm really glad. I also have Orthodox friends and family members who feel comfortable in that, and we have rather bitter arguments about these things. And all right, fine. If she feels that that's where she gets kavanah, that's great. I have a hard time with that. I have a hard time with that because I think that it's a rationalization of an inequality, and I'm really sensitive to rationalizations of inequality, even though I'm a participant in it because I'm male.
The other thing is,
take a look at this page.
Have the responsibility of having to daven 3 times a day. She has more freedom in some ways. That's another thing that some of the women in the
but except that the tradition never understood prayer as a burden; it understood as a privilege. That's why a man says Shelo Asani Isha in the morning, because he understands that he has the privilege of coming close to God with these men.
But the women do pray.
Yeah. Okay. So look at the page. So I wanted to show you what one author has done with some of these ideas, just to give you a model of what might be done if we really took this with some seriousness. Okay. So this woman is a poet. Her name is Marcia Falk. She lives in the Bay Area. And she's rewritten the prayer book. Kind of a chutzpahdik thing to do. And if you read the little statement at the bottom, she tells you what her object was. Basically, what she was looking to do was not only to change the pronouns of divinity, but to change the whole hierarchical notion. And to change hierarchies into communities. And to change binary separations into unities and connections. Does that make sense? So, for example, we have a bracha we say when we eat. Baruch atah Hashem motzi lechem min haaretz. Okay? So you want to take away the maleness of Baruch and Atah and Melech. But you also want to take away, you also want to correct or change the hierarchy of Melech HaOlam, a God who sits on a throne over us, and turn that into a sort of common experience of the source of all. So she starts with the phrase, Nivarech. Not Baruch, but Nivarech. Let us praise. Okay? Et Ein HaChaim. Now, Ein HaChaim means the well of life, or the spring of life. Springs, as you know in the Bible, are places where all kinds of interesting things happen, right? Springs are associated with femininity in the Bible, right? Because they are wells into the earth from which waters come and life comes, right? So Miriam, for example, someone mentioned Miriam. Miriam, wherever Miriam goes, there's a well. And on the day that Miriam dies, that's the day Moshe can't find water for the people. So Ein HaChaim is a metaphor for God instead of Melech HaOlam. Source of life, or spring of life, or well of life. Hamotziah lechem min haaretz. From whom comes the sources, the lechem of life. It's, yes, that's Hamotziah, because Ein is Ein in Hebrew is a feminine noun. Ein is Hebrew is a feminine noun, right? And then she does the same thing with the bracha that we say first thing in the morning after the Baruch Hu. The first thing in the morning Baruch Hu is Yotzer Or Uvorei Choshech Choseh Shalom Uvorei Et HaKol. It's actually based on a verse in Isaiah, which is a God who creates everything, forms the world, creates good and evil. Now here what you're trying to do is to take the disconnects, the binaries, and turn them into unities. So, Nivarech et Ein HaChaim, source of light and darkness, heart of harmony and chaos, creation and creativity. Instead of saying this or that, it's this and that. You see the difference? Here is her take on the Shema, right? And then what's really more interesting below that is Havdalah, because this is the first prayer she ever wrote, and I gave you the commentary she wrote on the bottom here, right? Where she says, Havdalah, lahavdil. Havdalah is a prayer we say at the end of Shabbos, right? Making of distinctions. She says, I've been thinking of this subject for a long time. I've been a feminist half a century. The fundamental insight of feminism is that in the patriarchal world, that's male, which we inhabit, there is an ever-present underlying dualistic hierarchy. That's a great phrase. An underlying dualistic is A and B, this and that, hierarchy that privileges male above female. And she says, more than that, it privileges all of this stuff. This over this, this over this, this over this. She says, I don't want to do that. I don't want to privilege one over the other. I want to connect them. So instead of Hamavdil bein kodesh lechol, bein or lechoshech, bein Yisrael amim, between light and darkness, between holy and profane, between Israel and the world and the rest of the world, she connects them. Let us distinguish parts within the whole and bless their differences. Like the Sabbath and the 6 days of creation, may our lives be whole through relation. As rest makes Sabbath precious, may our work give meaning to the week. Let us separate the Sabbath from the other days of the week, seeking holiness in each. You see what she did there? Instead of making it appositions, it becomes unities. This is one attempt, and it's only one attempt. One woman, one poet, very talented poet, one attempt to try and figure out, if I were trying to move Jewish thinking from its traditional maleness and its hierarchical structure to a more horizontal unity structure, what might it sound like? What might it sound like? It's a very courageous attempt. In some ways, it's a little weird. It feels a little weird. It feels uncomfortable because it's not what we're used to. But you can see how brave she is in trying to do this and in trying to show us ways in which the stuff that we say we believe in, a God who's beyond gender, a God who's embracing as well as being authoritarian, how that plays itself out in the tradition. All right, you've made me feel much better because I obsessed over that one phrase, and now I feel like I got it out of my system. Next week, our guest is Rabbi Nechama Goldman Barash, a wonderful teacher of halakha. We'll see you next week. Have a good Shabbos, everyone. Take care.
Oh, that was very good.
Thank
As
you.
bad as we are, the other religions are worse.
Ah.
What about God walking the earth as a man?